TCGs from the Crypt.
The late 80s and early 90s was a pretty awesome time to be into video games, with many of the games released back then spawning beloved franchises that would continue to this day. Anything seemed possible on the NES, from Mario's side-scrolling adventures to Zelda's open world. There were games about ninjas, games about space aliens, games about racing, and games about delivering newspapers. It had it all. First released in 1987, Megaman was a game about, well, Megaman, the robot boy created by the wise Dr. Light who would crusade against the evil Dr. Wily's ever-growing army of thematically sinister robot masters. The game was an instant hit, winning gamers over with its challenging levels, iconic boss designs, and kick-ass music, and it marked the start of a massive multimedia franchise. It received a load of sequels and had a cartoon, an OVA, manga and comic adaptations, and loads of music groups making songs based on the games. Yeah, seriously, between the Megas, the Proto-Men, Megaran, and more, Mega Man is basically its own music genre. But that wasn't all. Capcom, the company behind Mega Man, would periodically give the series a fresh new start. The player base aged, after all, and Capcom was always looking to bring in younger audiences. In 1993, we got Mega Man X, which brought the franchise into the 16-bit era, giving us a new, sleeker robot hero. In 1997, the series moved to 3D with the release of the PlayStation 1 Mega Man Legends, which tried to combine the sci-fi nature of the setting with the adventure games that were kind of popular at the time. And in 2001, the series got its most dramatic overhaul yet with the start of the Mega Man Battle Network series for the Game Boy Advance. These games were completely different from the titles that came before. For one, they were RPGs with a more restrictive battle screen as opposed to the more open side-scrollers or adventure titles of the past, and their story was completely disconnected from the previous games. Yeah, up until this point, the Mega Man series was all connected. X was a 100 years later sequel to the original games, and Legends was even further into the future, but Battle Network was a new story for a new audience. The Internet audience. This series followed the adventures of a kid named Lan and his digital friend, the NetNavi, Megaman.exe, as they tried to save the Internet and the world from the various criminals led by, Dr. Wily? Okay, so they recycle a lot, but trust me, it was good. This new series turned out to be a smash hit, getting several sequels of its own, including a sequel series in Mega Man Star Force, as well as all kinds of tie-in merchandise like the PET. Does anyone remember these? I don't know what happened to mine, but I remember loving it. What a cool toy. Battle Network also got an anime adaptation, Megaman NT Warrior, produced by Studio Zebek, which started airing in 2002 and ran for several seasons and loosely covered the plot of the games.
Yeah, nobody in the world makes better cupcakes than my mom. Better cupcakes than my mom. Better cupcakes.
At the time, it was pretty popular. Mega Man was getting a bit of a resurgence in the West, so it felt like this new anime with a new take on the franchise helped bring a lot of people into the series. Sure, it wasn't anything to write home about, but hey, at least I enjoyed it. Oh, also it had a trading card game. That's right, in 2004, the Mega Man NT Warrior trading card game would be released, produced by Decipher, a company with a questionable track record. You see, back in the 80s, this company produced mostly puzzle and party games, most famously How to Host a Murder, but when the 90s rolled around and Magic the Gathering first hit the shelves, they were one of several companies to see dollar signs in the TCG industry and were among the first to release a trading card game. Notably, unlike other companies that tried to make their own IPs to compete with Magic, Decipher decided to make licensed card games based on existing properties. They started with a Star Trek TCG back in 1994 and, over the next 14 years or so, would release more than 10 licensed trading card games. What makes this particularly impressive is that none of these card games stuck around for more than 3 years. Most barely lasted 2, but they just kept cranking them out. They had a Star Wars card game, a Lord of the Rings card game, a Beyblade card game, another Star Wars card game, and yeah, Mega Man NT Warrior. As you might have guessed based on the name, this card game is more based on the NT Warrior anime than the Battle Network video games, and it shows. A lot of the cards just straight up use screenshots from the anime for card art, and if you know your card games, you know that's usually a bad sign, but more on that later. The NT Warrior first released in 2004 with the Power Up set, and over the following year would get 2 more sets, Grand Prix and Grave. Each of these sets came in boxes of 24 packs with 10 cards in each pack. Each set had just around 100 cards total, so opening a box got you quite a bit of duplicates, which is always good for deck building. In addition, each set would release with 2 starter decks, and in my opinion, these were great intro products for the game. Each contained a playmat, a rulebook, and a full deck which even had unique NetNavis you couldn't pull out of the sets themselves. These NetNavis are kind of the focus of the game. Much like in games like Flesh and Blood and Universes, you have a single character card that represents you, the player. This is your NetNavi, and they face off against other players' NetNavis in battle for control over cyberspace. The overall rules are fairly straightforward and simple to understand, but also fun, kind of intuitive, and try to emulate the feel of powering up to take on your opponent. So get this. In this game, you and your opponent take turns attacking each other with your respective NetNavis, with damage dealt to your opponent discarding that many cards from the top of their deck. When your opponent decks out, they lose. So in a way, it's kind of like one big millfest. There are 4 basic card types in this game. First is your NetNavi, which has its own stats like strength, defense, and its blast score. Most, but not all, NetNavis have a unique ability as well, which can help you decide your game plan. Resource cards are kind of like a mix between magic's enchantments and lands. They provide 1/3 of the resource system in the game, but also provide effects until they're used up or destroyed. Battlechip cards are cards you can play once per main phase, either your own or your opponent's, and usually buff your NetNavi in some way. And then there's event cards, which you can play as many of as you like so long as you meet their requirements. When the game begins, the first thing you do is power up, taking a card from the top of your deck and placing it, face down I should specify, into your power gauge. Remember those resource cards from earlier? Well, some cards need you to have a certain number of colored resources in play, while others need you to have a certain number of power in your gauge. Importantly, neither of these resources are used up as you play cards. When you have 3 power, you can play any number of events that require 3 power. Oh, and the final resource is emblems. Some cards can only be played if you have the right NetNavi. See this little symbol here on the NetNavi? Yep, that's their emblem. If you want to play a card that has an emblem that doesn't match this one, you just can't. Back to power for a bit. Powering up is non-optional. If you already have a full gauge when your turn begins, you simply discard the first card in the gauge and slide the rest over to make room. Generally speaking, this is a waste, and you'll want to use up your gauge with blast actions, which we'll talk about in a second. After powering up, you draw a card, then make sure you have 5 cards in hand or less, then play up to 4 resources and begin your main phase. Here is where you can play events, play a battle chip, spend your resources, or do what's called a blast. So get this 3rd number on the NetNavi card is their blast number, and if you have at least as many cards in your power gauge as this number, you can reveal that many cards and choose one of them to add their respective blast number to your NetNavi's strength for the turn. You can only blast once per turn, and all cards revealed when you blast are discarded. Now once you've made all the plays you can, this game's battle phase is a simple numbers check, comparing your NetNavi's strength against your opponent's defenses, and if your power is greater, the difference is discarded directly from your opponent's deck. And of course, with enough back and forth like this, eventually one of you runs out of cards and the victor is declared. Now then, with that out of the way, let's go over my thoughts on the game. First, I need to say, I think this game is pretty fun. A friend and I actually do sit down and get a game or two in once in a while, and we have a blast. The gameplay is simple, yet evocative of the anime and video game it's an adaptation of, and the gameplay itself feels intuitive, easy to follow. Filling up your little power gauge in order to play your Battlechips definitely gives flavor to the idea that you're waiting for your download to finish before attacking, and there's a nice, wide selection of NetNavis to choose from for your deck. And while the overall battle system is simple, just comparing numbers at the end of the day, how each turn plays out can vary wildly, since which events and Battlechips you play can drastically alter the game state.
Also, I just love the design of these Battlechip cards. Decipher made them look just like the chips from the anime, and that is super flavorful.
And yeah, I don't have anywhere else to talk about it, but there's actually a promo NetNavi card for Megaman X that you got if you bought the Command Mission video game, and I just thought that that was kind of cool, and I want to pick it up for my collection someday. Overall, I've got to say that NT Warrior has a lot of flavor and love built into it, and it's got plenty of variants, enough at least for me to say it's worth picking up and trying. But of course, if I'm giving it such praise, you've got to wonder, why did it fail? Well, the game wasn't exactly perfect. For one, Decipher really did take the lazy route when choosing to use anime screenshots for most of their cards, which I think is always a disservice, especially when they're such low-quality screenshots. The game wasn't exactly heavily advertised back in the day either, and there didn't appear to be much effort from the company to foster a tournament scene. And in terms of gameplay, while most of the game is intuitive, making it so that taking damage causes you to lose cards from the top of your deck led to a lot of feel-bad scenarios, especially when one of the cards you milled could have helped turn a losing situation around. And yeah, it is pretty flavorful. NetNavis are computer programs fighting in the internet after all, so damage taken would naturally mess with their memory, their library, if you would, but still it's not a great feel. One solution I've seen to this issue is simply removing the mechanic and giving each player a life total instead. It accomplishes the same goal in the end, and it helps you feel like you're not losing cards you needed. Another issue, though a much smaller one, is card selection, and this one's just an unfortunate side effect of the game's lifespan. With only slightly more than 300 cards to choose from, and 20 NetNavis in the game, not all characters were supported equally. Remember the Megaman X promo? Yeah, he has no support cards at all, and he doesn't even have an effect, so playing with him now basically feels like a handicap. There are a few other small nitpicks I could point out, but the real reason this TCG failed is simple. It was a licensed game, and licensed games have a shelf life. The fan bases are fleeting after all, and with the anime ending, the card game was struggling to gain any real popularity. Sure, some diehards stuck around for all three releases, but there's only so much content Decipher could have pulled from anyway, meaning NT Warrior was kind of doomed from the start. And so, after only 3 sets and just over 300 cards, Megaman NT Warrior joined countless other card games in the TCG Crypt. Now, it's not all doom and gloom. Like I said before, this is a fun game, and I know there's people out there who still enjoy playing it, even now, 20 years after it first showed up. And the best part is that this game is, well, pretty cheap. Sealed decks hover at around MSRP or cheaper, and booster boxes can be picked up for between $30 to $60 on eBay and Amazon. Whether you're a Mega Man fan or just a lover of card games, I think picking up a box or two of the NT Warrior TCG is a good idea. It's easy to learn, has a decently high skill ceiling, and provides a nice deck-building experience.
Also play Skullman, he is the best NetNavi. This is a face you can trust.
Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed, consider liking the video, sharing it with a friend, and subscribing to the channel. If you want to support me directly, consider heading on over to Patreon. Patron donations help me pay for the card games I'm reviewing, and in turn, they get early access to all of my content. Have you ever tried the Mega Man card game? If you have, I want to hear your thoughts below. If you haven't, I still want to hear your thoughts, but they better be thoughts about how you're going to try it out. Thanks again for watching, and have a great day.
It's not about the cupcakes. Who cares about the cupcakes? I bet they're all gone.